Okay, hello everybody. This is the presentation for Heather. Today, the 6th of November 2024, we transition from the days of Gorse to the days of Heather. So I'm going to do a presentation about that. And I've been on the road for 3 weeks and my brain's a little bit scattered. I've been having quite a wild hunt of everything and giving talks about the wild hunt. So I apologize that I haven't given a great deal of thought to this presentation. And as always, whenever I'm preparing a PowerPoint presentation, discovering new things and thinking, oh, there's too many tangents to keep following. And that just seems to be the nature of the game, really. I'm going to bring up my PowerPoint presentation. So one of the things I thought, because I didn't have much time, I thought of doing this presentation mainly about the Irish god, the Dagda, the good god, the great god, the Dagda. That's what the name means. It just means the great god or the good god, the Dagda. And there's a logic to placing him with Heather, but I realized in the last couple of days, there's also a really good logic to placing the goddess Morrigan with the Heather. And part of me thinks that really I should have given Heather to the Morrigan. That's just a way of it. Actually, they're related because they're husband and wife, but it might be that Dagda is better placed in Aspen or Morrigan is better placed in Aspen. We'll figure it out anyway. Just the nature of this year and the exploration of gods and goddesses. And of course, the most important goddess in Irish mythology is Danu. And I haven't placed her anywhere. She's not in any tree, but I would place her at the center above everything. And her equivalent in Wales is Doan. So Ireland has Danu, the Great Mother, and Wales has Doan, the Great Mother. But anyway, more on that later on. So if you're interested in the basic lore about Heather, go on the YouTube channel and Google Heather 2022. That's when we looked at a basic lore of Heather. And in 2023, we looked at herbalism. So if you want the herbalism of Heather, go on the YouTube channel and put Heather 2023. So this year, and we're nearly at the end of it, we've only got 2 trees left. This year, we've been looking at which gods and goddesses are most appropriate to each tree based on classical lore and based on stories and so on. So that's what we're doing for Heather today, looking at which deity corresponds best. And initially, when I was traveling around, I was thinking Dagda. And then in the last couple of days, I was thinking Morrigan. So that's kind of how the presentation's going to unfold. So just quickly then, the days of Heather, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, begin at the 15th degree of Scorpio, which is technically speaking Samhain. And it goes on to the 3rd degree of Sagittarius. So Sagittarius, I'll come to, mainly looking at the last 15 degrees of Scorpio, but mythologically speaking, the cusp between Scorpio and Sagittarius in zodiac mythology is the sting of the scorpion. It's the death sting. And Scorpio actually strikes Sagittarius with that death blow. And Sagittarius is seen as a dying king or a wounded king because of that sting of the scorpion. So Heather is holding that sting of the scorpion, which is the cusp between Heather and Aspen. Uniquely, the Ogham is often described as a system of trees, and for the most part it is, but there are a few exceptions, and gorse and heather are one of the main exceptions. They're both heathland shrubs, and they're side by side with Samhain in between them. So they create what I call the wild heath, or the heath, and it's the wild heath of Samhain. It's the wild, feral landscape that the wild hunt is racing across. And fascinating time. So we looked at the winter hunter and the wild hunt in the previous session about gorse. So if you're more interested in the chase that leads to Samhain, that's in the days of gorse. Now we're at Samhain, we're moving on to the realm of the dead, which is the aspen trees, Sagittarius. So there's different ways of observing festivals, and the common way in the current Gregorian calendar, it's like the 1st of May for Beltane and All Hallows Eve, or the 1st of November for Samhain. But actually you can be a bit more pedantic, like there are exact moments in time when there's a winter solstice and a summer solstice, and therefore autumn equinox and spring equinox. So the midpoints between the equinoxes and the solstices are Imbolc, Beltane, Lughnasadh, and Samhain. And so you can be finicky and say, as far as the sun's journey around its ecliptic, today, 6th of November 2024, it's the 15th degree of Scorpio, the midpoint between autumn equinox and winter solstice. And some interesting patterns with that. As well as death being an entrance to the spirit world, whether you're going through that gateway as a shaman or literally when it comes for our own time to die, death is the doorway to the spirit world and the realm of ancestors. And according to Gaelic mythology, or ancestral law, depending how you want to look at it, a large group of Irish people that were known as the Scoti, and they eventually settled in the Western Isles of what became known as Scotiland or Scotland. The origin of Scots Gaelic came from a tribe of people or group of Irish sea traders known as the Scoti, and they claimed descent from an Egyptian princess called Scota. So it's quite interesting that the Ogham year wheel of 8 equally spaced festivals is portrayed in Egypt. I'm not making any big conclusions there, other than there's an Egyptian influence on Mediterranean sea trade, and the Irish Celts theoretically come from the Iberian Peninsula of Spain and Portugal and Marseille. And their own law about Princess Scota is that she left Egypt and settled in Spain. For about 1,000 years, her offspring. So it's not that Scota herself went to Ireland, but 1,000 years of generations from her, from Celtic Spain, travelled up the Atlantic coast and settled in Ireland. That's according to the Scoti themselves. So make of it what you will, but the mythology of Ireland is phases of invasions of people coming from different places, of course. So just some things in passing. Things will make sense a bit further on. So you'll see on the left-hand side says Aldebaran. And Aldebaran is a bright star in the constellation of Taurus the Bull. Now, opposite Aldebaran, roughly on the right-hand side, it says Antares. Now, this is the one we want to look at. Antares is the bright star of Scorpio. So they're a kind of polarity opposite each other, Aldebaran and Scorpio. These are the 4 royal stars. It's called the Royal Star Cross. Now, both Aldebaran and Antares correspond with what are known as stargates. And the stargates were a kind of literal or mystical gateway between incarnation and the spirit world, theoretically from different mystery schools. What looks like a plate, almost horizontal, is the sun's ecliptic. That's the sun traveling around the stars throughout the year. And then crossing the ecliptic is another circle, the circle of stars here, which is the Milky Way. So there are just two places in the year where the Milky Way is seen to cross over the sun's ecliptic. And that corresponds with Antares and Aldebaran. Or you could say between Scorpio and Sagittarius, and between Taurus and Gemini. Now, Heather is Scorpio Sagittarius. Now, so another way of looking at it is that with Antares, you've got Samhain, and with Aldebaran, you've got Beltane as polarity times of the year. So both Beltane and Samhain were seen as stargates. Theoretically, the stargate of now, during the days of Heather, is, because of the death sting of Scorpio, is the moment of death, and thus the soul ascending up the Milky Way, up into the spirit realm. So that descending up into the Milky Way happens now during the Heather. And the opposite time of the year, Beltane, is when souls descend back down to this realm. So they've been up and over the Milky Way and they've come back down. And then what's quite interesting is ideas, shamanic ideas of the underworld, the stars going below the horizon, as it were. After Beltane, it goes down to the lower part of the Milky Way, where we have Hydra, Crater the wine mixing cup, or Ceridwen's cauldron, and Corvus the crow. So all of that mystery school stuff is in the lower part of the Milky Way. And then there's a rising to the days of Heather. So it's just another glimpse of the very rich symbolism of the days of Heather being the cusp between Scorpio and Sagittarius, and that moment of death. Not just death and there's nothing else, but death and then the soul ascends into the Milky Way spirit realm of stars, which is played out with the aspen tree. So this very moment in time, then, you can see at the bottom it says Scorpius. On the right it says Libra. So we traveled from Libra to Scorpio with Gorse. And directly above Gorse are the serpent's head, serpent's caput, and Corona Borealis, the northern crown, which is what the Canunus figure holds on the Gunderstruck cauldron. Now we're the second half of Scorpio going towards Sagittarius. So we're going from the bottom here towards the left-hand side. And that corresponds with a great big constellation known as Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer. He's a big topic in his own right, and I want to focus on the Dagda. But Ophiuchus was also related or corresponded with a god of healing called Asclepius. And Asclepius was such an amazing healer that he could bring the dead to life. And this angered the gods, so they put him up in the sky, sort of thing. But it's quite interesting because the Dagda has a staff that can bring the dead to life as well. And so it's corresponding with his time of year. So the star law of now is about Scorpio stinging Sagittarius with a death sting, but a celestial healer that can bring the dead back to life, or the uninitiated to initiation. That is, they go through the mystery traditions up the Stargate into the star realm and then come back down at Beltane, which is when Taliesin is found in the salmon weir with a radiant brow. So there are ideas to think there can be death literally, or there can be death of the old and the beginning of the new. So anyone going into an initiation, the old self is gone when you're an initiated higher awareness radiant brow type thing. So two of my dryads from this year's project, and it's just to remind me that there is some interesting Ogham lore about death that is quirky and fits in, you know. So again, it's not only the Ogham Grove that applies the Ogham to the sun's ecliptic, but in the Briatha Ogham, the word kennings for heather, and we're in the days of heather now. One of them is substance of a poor home, i.e. it's an earthen floor. So heather can mean soil or earth. And the last Briatha Ogham is shroud of a lifeless one. And that's a metaphor for scattering earth on top of a body that's being buried. You know, that's the final covering of a dead body. So shroud of a lifeless one, the earth that is thrown into a grave. And curiously, aspen had a specific purpose in Irish culture, and its specific purpose made it a thing of taboo. No one wanted to go near it because a special kind of rod or ruler was made known as a fey, and it's just spelled F-E, so you can look it up. And a fey had to be made of aspen, and it had one job. It was kept in the local church, and the fey was used to measure a body for burial. So that's quirky, you know. We're at that time of the year when the star law is about a moment of death, and Briatha Ogham of heather is shroud of a lifeless one, that is burying them in soil. And aspen was used to measure out a body for burial. So it's, you know, they're intriguing things at this time of the year, you know, significant to right now. We'll look more at aspen next time. So looking at the classical gods and goddesses to right now and to help us figure out which deity would best correspond with the days of heather. So we're transitioning from 15 degrees Scorpio to the first 3 degrees of Sagittarius. And Sagittarius in the classical law corresponded with the king of the gods, Jupiter to the Romans and Zeus to the Greeks. So initially, that's kind of why I was thinking, and I'll give some more reasons to it, why I placed Dagda at this time of the year. And Dagda is seen as a great king of the Tuatha De Danann. He's like the ultimate father figure. He's the father of different gods and goddesses. So that was why I was thinking, well, if anyone was going to be the Zeus of the Celts of Ireland, it would be Dagda. Now I'm thinking that, yeah, there's a crossover with the Morrigan and the Dagda, because certainly Morrigan is much more scorpionic than the Dagda is. But I'll talk you through my logic with that. I haven't done any artwork really of the Dagda, only a cartoon. And you can look him up. There's lots of stories about him. As usual, what's frustrating with Irish stories is there's often contradictory stories of who his children are and who his siblings are. So Ogma, who created the Ogham, is said to be Dagda's brother. But elsewhere, Ogma is also said to be Bridget's brother. So there's variations on themes. And I think because of different Celtic tribes in Ireland, Ireland wasn't one unified Celtic tribe. There were about 20 to 30 different tribes in Ireland, and they all had their own variations of things. So hence you get different stories. Looking at ancient Gaul and old writings about the Druids, there's this figure from ancient Gaul with 3 faces, and theoretically it's Lugus, which archaeologists refer to the Celtic Mercury. Mercury has 3 faces. So I was working with that idea of this triple-headed or triple-aspected mercurial figure. And with my own researches, I'd kind of divided it into this idea. And that is, just like you have maiden, mother, crone, with the Celtic Mercury, different phases throughout the year. So on the right here, there's Lu with his spear. And in the middle is Ogma, creator of the Owen writing. And behind them is Dagda. And Dagda symbolism is what I'm going to talk about. But I kind of thought about sharing the year between three aspects of Mercury. So we touched on Ogma around midsummer, and we touched on Lu at the spring equinox. Now, after Samhain, we're looking at Dagda. But they are sometimes, in some stories, equated as a trio known as the Tridadana, the three gods of Danu. And the four treasures, like Spear of Lu, Cauldron of the Dagda, and so on, correspond with this kind of celestial divine kingship of that trio. So this is how I spaced them around the year, and this was based on star lore from Hadrian's Wall, a thing called the Mithraic rock birth. But simplistically, it's a way of dividing the year into three fields. Simply so you've got a field of play for each retrograde motion of Mercury. And I sketched it in on the left. Lu is the rising energy after winter solstice to the spring equinox. Ogma is the whole midsummer stuff, and it's mercurial, it's sun and moon. And then there's descending down into the field of Ogma, which is where we are. You can see Heather corresponding with the Dagda there. So it's just a way of dividing the year up into that theoretical triple Mercury, or Lu, Ogma, Dagda. Now then, here's some things. So my three fields, the field of Ogma takes us to the winter solstice. Sorry, the field of Dagda takes us to the winter solstice. On the left-hand side is a card I illustrated for an oracle deck called the Sacred Sites Oracle Deck. And it represents Newgrange in Ireland, and the god Aengus Og, the god of love. Now, the story for this card is that Dagda, who was married to the Morrigan, fancied or fell in love with a river goddess called Boann, and Boann is the namesake of the river Boyne that takes you to Newgrange. Now, the wonderful story of Dagda and Boann, she's already married to a not very nice husband, and Dagda falls in love with her, and he stops time. And we'll come back to that further on. He stops time so that he can sleep with her, and he stops time at the winter solstice. There's an interesting bit of folklore because Newgrange is a great big dolmen that receives the sunlight at winter solstice. Like the light of the sun penetrates the womb of Newgrange. And it was at winter solstice that Dagda stopped time to sleep with Boann, and she conceives a child and gives birth to him, all in this frozen moment of time. And the child of Dagda and Boann is Aengus Og, the god of love. So the god of love is born of this union between sun and earth, or heaven and earth, that happens at the winter solstice. So the god of love is almost like a golden child born at the winter solstice as well. So that's one aspect of Dagda, his relationship to the goddess, river goddess Boann, making him the father of the god of love. That ability to stop time is very interesting because amongst his magical attributes, the Dagda has a magical harp, and the magical harp is known as the Oak of Two Meadows. It is also known as four-angled music. It's like music divided into four aspects or four quarters, four-angled music. And the Ogham is that, the Ogham has 4 quarters in the year. And the reason for pointing that out is Ogma, the creator of the Ogham, is Dagda's brother. But also Dagda has, when he's playing his harp, he has the ability to keep the seasons turning, to keep time turning. He does that with the music of his harp. And for the goddess Boann, he stops time, like the standstill of winter solstice, to conceive the god of love. Morrigan, then, is a massive topic. She's often portrayed as scary, but that's not really true. She can be ferocious, like any wild mother animal would be ferocious, protecting her young. So she's a big protective force, really, and her main role in the stories of the Tuatha De Danann is protecting the Tuatha De Danann. But she's often portrayed as bad for different stories, for different reasons. But with the Dagda, there's a story of the first battle of Moytura, and it's curious because in that story, it's said that Dagda has sex with the Morrigan at Samhain. So, there's this union. He has union with Boann at winter solstice, but he has sex with Morrigan at Samhain. So it certainly makes Samhain and winter solstice quarter of the year very relevant to Dagda. And by making love to Morrigan, it's quite interesting how she's described. She's in County Sligo at a river. I can't remember the name of the river, but she's got a foot on either side of the river. So it's a bit like a Sheila na gig symbol. The waters are flowing between her legs, and she's this goddess of the land, if you like, sovereignty figure. And the name Morrigan can be translated as the Great Queen. So Dagda makes love to the Great Queen, where the river's flowing between her legs. And afterwards, she promises to help him fight their enemies, the Fomorians. And that's almost like the reward for making love to her, if you like, or honoring the sovereignty goddess. And she says that she will call all the magicians, i.e. druids, of Ireland to fight against the Fomorians. So as a goddess of magic and stuff, she has the power to help Dagda and the Tuatha De Danann defeat their enemies, but only because the old king made love to her. So it's that union again. So again, there's a very definite connection of Dagda and Morrigan at Samhain. So I was thinking really Morrigan belongs to the days of Heather, and it's something to explore in the future. And he sleeps with the goddess Boann at winter solstice as well. So going to do just a 5-minute plug of what I'm planning. This time of year, Samhain, naturally is when nature drops her seeds, and the seeds fall into the ground, which will then grow in the spring. Whether it's acorns falling off trees or rose hips falling off the wild rose or what have you, this is the time for seeds being planted in the soil. And heather can mean soil. Remember, shroud of a lifeless one. So this is the soil. This is the planting of the seeds after Samhain, after Morrigan has been made love to. So magically, individually, it's a good time for that. It's a time to think about what seeds you want to plant with the goddess. And one of my things that I started a while ago is this book, which I'm been various things getting in the way, stopping me from doing it, but it's 100 pages already, and I intend to get it done by the spring. There's a 60-page chapter just about the archaeology of Ogham and the history of the manuscript evidence and stuff. So that's one of my seeds, to focus on that when I can. This has been a huge thing. It's dominated this year. was trying to get it out before Christmas, but it's looking like it's going to be January. Apologies to people that are waiting for it. But the important thing for showing this is when the main body of it is 56 cards. 20 of them are dryads and 20 of them are botanical illustrations. And really those 40, two lots of 20, are the circumference of the Ogham Grove. So, and that's what we've done for 3 years now. We've spent 3 years going around the circumference of the Ogham Grove, and I'm a bit tired, and I'm a bit tired of doing PowerPoint presentations. So my idea is that next year we'll still go around the grove. We'll still do a meditation to each tree, but I want it to be much more casual so that I don't have to do PowerPoint presentations. So what's kind of falling into place quite nicely is the 16 Grove cards that go with this. And this doesn't mean you have to go and buy a deck, but it will kind of be the conversational piece. But the 16 Grove cards are ideas about what can be done inside your grove. So nominally, we'll go around the grove, but we won't look at each tree so much. We'll be looking at ideas about what to do with your own grove, what to do as a shamanic threshold, astral temple, however you want to work with it, so that next year we'll carry on doing around the grove, but it'll be much more conversational. Things that came up this year, like ideas of what can be discussed with next year, is like, just as we were passing summer solstice, I realized that the first letter of each quarter spells Mav. And Mav or Maeve is the sovereignty goddess of the Hill of Tara and Northern Ireland. And a bit like the Morrigan, whose name just means the Great Queen. So sovereignty goddess, Great Queen. Many places in Northern Ireland translate into English as Maeve's vulva. Think of the Morrigan with the river flowing between her legs. So these Sheila na gigs, great vulvas, are a big part of Irish mythology, though little is written down about it. But she's there, so it's something to explore inside the grove, aspects of the goddess of sovereignty. And another important figure for inside the grove is Brigid, because we're into the Aquarian age, and Brigid is the figurehead for the next 2,500 years. And again, her name kind of isn't a name. Brigid just means the High One. So whether it's Morrigan, the Great Queen, or Brigid, the High One, or the most exalted one, or Maeve as the sovereignty goddess of your grove, those ideas of what to do in the center of your grove and union between the individual and their muse, male or female, are ideas to look at with next year's journey around the grove. So I'll stop sharing and we can talk about some of those insights into the days of Heather, Death, and the Dagda.
It's a brilliant area.
Yes, very nice.
Thank you.
I love that you showed the three, Lug and Ogma and Dagda and the three divisions. And there's 3s and 5s that are so important all throughout the grove. They just melt like the 3 faces of all the goddesses and sovereignties. It's just amazing to me that just jives.
Yeah.
I love it. You explain it so well.
With the 3 divisions, I was just contemplating how do you work with Mercury retrograde? And the pentagrams in the Ogham Grove are very suggestive of and influenced by Venus, because Venus does a pentagram every 8 years. So there's the sun and the moon dancing around the ecliptic, and there's Mercury and Venus. And then in recent weeks, the lady, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Elk, E-L-K-E, Elke or Elk, but she was playing with Fion's window, which is an
Oh.
authentic concentric circles design from the Book of
I loved
Ballymote.
it.
And she plotted the evergreen pentagram, and it made a perfect galaxy spiral. And then she
Yeah.
plotted the Rose family pentagram, and it made another perfect galaxy
Perfect
spiral. So there's two, between the winter solstice pentagram and the summer solstice pentagram, there's two galaxy spirals. And Newgrange, where Dagda sleeps with Boann, the carvings on the stones are spirals, you know, amazing
spirals.
things, you know. So I feel like there's a lot to digest, there's a lot to settle down and think about. And so not doing PowerPoint presentations next year and just having conversational meetings, maybe looking at what we can do inside the Grove, takes pressure off me. I don't have to do homework and prepare a PowerPoint, and we can still meet up and have a meditation and stuff.
Right.
It's
Sounds great.
been a doctorate program here. I mean, the information is so rich and deep and well presented. It's just an astonishing gift. I can't get over how much knowledge you bring to this
It's
Thank
just
you.
so much work.
skill.
I need time for it to settle down. That's why I was kind of showing that book foundation level. It's like all the archaeology and history and basic meanings for a reading that can be there. But then in the future, I don't want to do a beginner's book. I just want to do a book about star law or whatever, other patterns and things, you know. So I don't want to stay teaching beginners. So I'd rather specialize into what appeals to me. Yeah.
Yuri, in
And
the
you
story
should.
that I learned of the Battle of Moitura, it's the daughter of Indek, king of the Favorig, that the Dagda has sex with after he talks with the Morrigan. He's going along the way. He meets her, and she tells him after they make love, she'll practice the deadly art of the wand. So I don't know if that has any, offers anything. I'll practice. I'll take
quite
on ninth of the
interesting.
army of the Favorig.
It's quite interesting that he's kind of a sexual character. So there's the goddess Boann, the river goddess, and there's Morrigan, and the one you're talking about. His long club, it might be a euphemism for something, that it's so, his long club is so big, he can't carry it around. It just drags on the floor. And as it's dragging on the floor, it makes a furrow in the soil. So it's like, so whether he's stimulating river goddesses or furrowing the ground, he's a god of fertility in that way. And the goddess Bridget is his daughter from so she's the daughter of the good god, the goddess of inspiration and imbas and stuff. So he's a rather lovable character.
The best.
Yeah.
I guess so.
And yet he's seen as the old god, so Lu and Ogma help after the second battle of Moitura. The Fomorians have stolen his harp. So they've stolen the magical artifact that allows him to keep the seasons turning. And so it's Lu, Ogma, and Dagda, or the Celtic Mercury, that go and retrieve the very special harp that keeps the seasons turning.
And I think it's the sword of Indek. Is it not the sword of Indek that knows the spells that have been placed on the Dagda's harp?
I don't know.
Or is it?
I'm keen to learn what you're saying, because there are different stories, and I don't know much about the name Indek.
Yeah. How do you spell that, Franklin?
I only know it by the sound of it, and I would guess it's Indec or Indek. But you know how it is. There sometimes the spelling looks like nothing like the pronunciation.
I know.
Yeah,
especially when you're mixing those
Welsh
letters, and
it might be Indech.
Oh yeah, Indek. Yeah.
So
There's
who is
another
this
sword.
Index?
There's a sword called the Sword of Tethra, which is achieved by Lu after he defeats Balor, and that sword is given to Ogma. So I was saying there's some stories where it's not that they contradict each other, it's just that there's variations on a theme. Yeah. I don't know enough Irish source material. I'm still learning. And
I learned it from Robin Williamson. He was a great bard and storyteller. And the Two Battles of Moytura by Robin Williamson.
Right.
Do you know Laura Lora O'Brien? She's in Waterford.
I know of her. I don't know her.
Yeah, she has an Irish pagan school there.
Yeah. I don't think she's very impressed with the Owen Grove, but
I don't know that she's been here.
No, the idea that it's like Robert Graves, it's a modern system.
Oh, right.
And we get,
I don't know. I've never spoken to her. Yeah.
We're caught in wanting to look at the myths rationally and arrive at one cohesive mythical model. But myth is not a rational scientific. It's the other side of the coin. It's where all these variations are welcome because they're archetypes that they're like using colors or something. You know, there's 1,000 ways to put these archetypes together in order to tell a story with a particular intention. And so, you know, there's not one way to interpret a myth. There's just all these different variations of them.
That's how I work with it. And Franklin, you've actually helped me with that over the years, you know, because I don't, as an artist, I'm interested in symbolism. And that's where I come from. I'm not interested in creating a Celtic dogma, but I want intelligent symbols. But your inner grove or your other world is yours, and no one can tell you that your inner vision is wrong. You know, and I think the spirit world is big enough to use symbols from past mythologies and sing a song to you that's relevant to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great quote from Joseph Campbell, relevant to that, in which he says, as soon as we start taking a myth and applying it to history, we've lost the myth. We're in another world, you know, because the myth is the other world. And it's not history. It's meaning. It's moral. Whatever, you know. It's magical. It's irrational.
Yeah. But the dream time needs, doesn't it? The surrealism needs to be, the dream world needs to be free of free of
the dogma.
Spirit is trying to go to arrive at, it's like science and spirit trying to arrive at one ultimate truth, but the soul is the other way. It's trying to see how everything is connected, but they all have a place in the one.
Yeah. And also I'm wondering with that, you know, the different interpretations, that if one could be that he's describing an era, and the Battle of Moytura was actually like this time now, when everything is breaking up, and you know the song maker has been lost, and the whole making of a new world, so to speak, which is on its way. I just thought there was something that you said earlier, and I thought, gosh, that is like that you know, that they're kind of describing a time, a great time of conflict and change, and that's how it sort of worked in with that. Yeah. So there was more that I was thinking that I can't get hold of because there's so many coming up. It's lovely.
Yeah.
As has been said, I really resonate with so much. Well, all of what you talk is, it's not sort of definable in a rational brain way, but so much of it rings true. It all rings true. It's like this piecing of a kind of heart jigsaw. I mean, the thing that struck me, the harp, you said the harp was stolen, and the harp was what kept the seasons turning.
Right.
And there's something about vibration and the song, like what is it called? The music of the spheres, or there's something about being in tune and the right vibration and singing the world into life. For me, that's where I come from. Again, none of this is definable, but I resonate with that story.
These are the lines I know. The Dagda had the harp, Dagda blow, that had the power to call forth the seasons in their order. The Dagda knew the modes and fingerings for each incantation of the year, but it was the power of the harp that called forth the seasons.
Exactly. That's brilliant. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. Exactly that.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to go to the Royal Albert Hall recently and see the final performance by Clannad. Alan
lovely.
Houghton, who's helping me with the Oracle deck, took me along. It was an amazing gift. And dominating the stage, the center of stage, was this huge Irish harp that the lead singer plays when she's singing. And all the lights are shining on it. And that harp is the symbol of Ireland, really,
Yes.
and it's the symbol of the Dagda as well, and just incredible. Yeah, that is really holding the wheel of the year together, or the cycle of time together. And only that wheel god can stop time to make love at winter solstice, to create a god of love and things,
I have to share with you, because I was privileged, because as a celebrant, I was in Ireland years ago for a big wedding, and who was performing there? Clannad were the live performers during the service. They played 5 different songs, so I got the privilege of prompting them for when it was appropriate for another song. I mean, they are magical, and it is something about the magic of music, and particularly the harp. The harp is the instrument of the angels. It is the instrument of the angels.
Yeah.
I've heard it said that although now we talk about the bagpipe as being an instrument on the battlefield, originally it was the harp, right? And it's so hard to understand. What do you mean the harp was on the battlefield? What you can imagine is that with music, you can discombobulate people, but you can also break their heart, right?
Yes.
They're coming for battle, and the harp does something that can just completely make them drop their swords and not know which way to run, because the music is so deep.
Beautifully expressed, beautifully said. Yes, that's so true.
Lovely. Yeah.
We need harps.
Or it could also stir up the what do they call it? Patriotism, right? That now I'm just going to fight to my death because I love the country. I have to protect the women, and I'm all in. But the harp, the music of the harp is spiritual power.
Yeah.
That interesting observation then. So like talking about symbolism or being true to original stories or archaeology, that's like the intellectual integrity, trying to be truthful to whatever. But music is beyond intellectual. It's just emotional, isn't it? It can lift you. It
comes from here,
bring you down. It can break you into tears, or and Dagda's harp does all of that, even lulls people to sleep and things, So no matter what the mind is doing, those strings are going to change how you feel about something.
Yeah.
Can I take the risk of offering a very brief song on that?
Yes, and do that, and then we do our meditation.
We are angels. We have forgotten these things, trailing clouds of glory. We are remembering. We are angels. We have forgotten these things, trailing clouds of glory. We are remembering. Over to you, Yori.
Thank you. Thank you, JJ.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, JJ.
So if you put your microphones off, or talk us through the meditation. 18 trees now.